Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Founder Spotlights. We have a fantastic founder with us today, Sara Moll from Vin Social, and we'll get right to the program in just a few minutes. Before we get to the conversation, just a few quick thank yous and announcements. Quickly, we are going to record this session, so if you have a question for Sara or myself, and we ask you to come on video, your video and your audio will be recorded. If you prefer not to, just you can put your question in the chat and we can read it out and ask that question that way. My name is Andy Saldana, and I'm the Executive Director of New York Tech Alliance. New York Tech Alliance is a nonprofit organization focused on driving access, equity, and inclusion within the New York tech ecosystem. If you want to learn more about what we do, you can check us out at nytech.org, and you can always feel free to reach out to me at andy@nytech.org. A wonderful thank you to all of our annual partners that make our programming possible. Everybody from Xandr, Grasshopper, Google, Insperity, Eisner Amper, and the number of partners that you see here. You can learn more about them on our website. And a very special thank you to Mastercard StartPath, who is funding this particular program and is really all about increasing diversity within the technology community through their StartPath Accelerator program. We encourage you to check them out, and you can learn more about them on our website. Our upcoming programs, this Tuesday, November the 2nd, we have our November New York Tech Meetup. It's an amazing meetup lineup, all about accessibility in tech. Everybody from Thomas Logan, Mariella Polino, talking about accessibility within the tech ecosystem, to Kamel Arroyo, who's with the MTA, the Chief Accessibility Officer of the MTA, and Blaine Herman of Dubbot. All of the speakers are really wonderful, and it's a really great opportunity to network with fellow technologists, so we encourage you to check it out this Tuesday, November the 2nd. In addition to the New York Tech Meetup on November the 2nd, we have a VC panel that is being led by the wonderful Paul Ellis. That will be scheduled for Thursday, November the 18th. So some wonderful programs coming up from New York Tech Alliance. We encourage you to check them out. If you have an event that you'd like to submit to the tech ecosystem, you can always do that on our website at nytech.org/events. And then you can always watch past conversations like today's on our YouTube channel or the Founder Spotlights channel at nytech.info/founder spotlights. And with that, we're going to get right into the conversation. So I'd love to introduce the wonderful Sara Moll of Vin Social. Let me add her to the spotlight. Stop sharing my screen.
Hey. Hi,
guys. Wonderful. And Sara, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself to the audience.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I myself am in Colorado. I was a former New Yorker for 15 years. I escaped, I guess you could say, a couple of years ago. But again, yes, my name is Sara Moll, and I am the founder and CEO of Vin Social. I am also a certified sommelier, a certified specialist of wine, hold a WSET level 3 credential, so AKA a wine nerd at heart, and also obviously a startup founder. Prior to sort of making a pretty aggressive pivot into the wine and hospitality industry, I had a decade-long career in the fashion industry, which was what brought me to New York many years ago after college. I worked in the accessory side of the business as a creative director, designer, working my way up to creative director over a decade. And just really, at the end of the day, I had a real entrepreneurial itch I wanted to scratch, and I was pretty much over and a little bit jaded by the fashion industry and wanted to do something different. And I had always had a real interest in the culinary arts. And obviously living in New York City was a playground, so much access. And that's kind of how I stumbled into discovering wine as a real opportunity. Not just because it was a point of interest for me personally and some, sort of a passion and interest that I wanted to pursue, but I saw, there was a lot of potential for disruption. And obviously as a founder looking to start something, you want to look for a place that has opportunity. And I do still think there's tremendous opportunity in the wine industry for disruption. It's a pretty antiquated industry, especially as it relates to technology. And that's really where we found a lot of success, is bringing digital transformation and pioneering what it would look like to bring the wine industry into the digital world.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah, for that wonderful introduction. I am so excited to have you today for this conversation. After learning a little bit more about Vin Social and just your journey as a founder and the business that you've created, I'm just super excited to get into some of the details about how you've built that business and kind of your journey in becoming a founder overall. You mentioned a little bit about it, right? Like coming from the fashion industry and looking for something different, a career change. And I was reading your bio on the Vin Social website, and I love the part about your interest in wine and taking a class and it just sparking something in you. And I'd love for you to tell the audience a little bit about like what would that first experience with wine was and kind of how it's turned into a career.
Yeah. Like I mentioned, with any sort of entrepreneurial venture, you first probably encounter a problem that you wish could be solved, right? And for me, that was really the impetus to start Vin Social. It was pretty immediate upon my sort of jumping into the deep end of the proverbial wine pool, if you will. So like I said, I dabbled in some pedestrian wine courses over the years, but when I decided to make, a real committed professional pursuit in wine, I attended the professional sommelier training program at the International Culinary Center, which was formerly the French Culinary Institute located in New York City. And it was incredible, right? My instructors, the dean of studies, the entire program was run by master sommeliers, which are the hyper elite of the wine world. So like I said, really got thrust into the deep end of the pool and learned the world of wine in a really aggressive, fast and furious fashion. And it was through that experience that I found myself now being considered among my peers to be this quote wine expert, right? And all of a sudden, my peers, these are people that were not from the wine industry, not from the hospitality industry, more traditional business, confiding in me suddenly about how they're really interested in wine, but really intimidated by the subject and actually kind of unsure how to even join the conversation. And it was so prolific, I started to really look at it and say, well, why is that? Because now that I'm not on the outside looking in, I'm on the inside looking out. The people that comprise the wine industry love people. They love to share their knowledge, and it's all about hospitality. So what is the disconnect? Why do the consumers not feel that? And what I realized again was kind of going back to this antiquated approach to wine education, which is really what Vin Social has and is disrupting, is a modern approach to wine education. Historically, right, wine education, you think about it, you're talking to some old white guy in a suit and tie with a pin lapel who's lecturing you about the technical minutia, the academic sort of aspects of wine, which is all great. And, having a foundational understanding of the theories of wine and history and science and all those things are important. But for me, what I realize is that's not what lights a consumer up inside and makes them excited about wine. What's interesting about wine from a consumer's perspective is not how wine is made, it's why wine is made. And so we set out from the beginning to make sure that we were putting at the forefront the storytelling aspects and really bringing the human stories beyond the bottles to life, and doing it in a way that was really engaging and inclusive and fun and interactive. And because we were really focused on the human stories behind wine, that also led us to be very intentional around identifying wineries or producers that we think don't get enough spotlight, right? There are literally millions of different wine brands produced across the globe, and most consumers only know about like the top 2%. And those are because those are brands that are owned by large corporations and conglomerates. They have giant marketing departments. They have lots of money to market and get their story out in front of consumers, whereas the vast majority of brands literally don't have those resources. And so for us, it was about let's find those purpose-driven producers that have really incredible stories that we think are making an amazing product, but they just don't have a stage. And let's give them a spotlight. And so whether that's through a live event or content or our wine club or whatever we are doing, we are still today very selective and making sure that we're representing diversity and inclusivity in those brands. So we're right now, all 100% of the partners, the winery or even craft spirits partners we work with, have to have diversity representation in their leadership team. So whether that be the maker themselves, a founder or leader of the winery or the distillery. And likewise, that extends across to our team and the sommeliers that we train and recruit to sort of be the extension of these stories for our brands and for Vin Social are also must represent diversity and inclusivity.
No, that's amazing. I think you've touched on so many different aspects there, from the supplier side of the vineyards and the winemakers to the customer service side of your employees and the people who are representing your brand, as well as the people who are attending the events, right? So there's so many different pieces of the puzzle that you're putting together and talking about holding them accountable on that whole diversity piece. You can see that trend and thread through your entire business. So that's quite amazing. I love on your website that you say you're democratizing the wine business and the wine experience. And I have some experience with wine. I'm not super experienced. I know what kinds of wines I like, but
Oh, you know.
yeah, exactly. But I love the fact that you're putting that social piece front and center, right? Because that's what it's about. It's about bringing people together and definitely sharing that experience with the people who are close to you. I love that. When we talk about building your business, and you talked about going from this learning about wine and being interested in wine to wanting to disrupt the education piece, how did you first start? Like, what were the first things that you did to get Vin Social up and off the ground? Was it, I imagine it was a very much like experiential
It
type.
was, yes. It's really funny because I just realized Facebook reminded me last night that it was like 8-year anniversary of the first Vin Social, which is crazy. So, like I said in the beginning, it was really just exploratory. It was like my test kitchen, right? And there was many years of that before I really honed in on exactly what Vin Social's brand was going to stand for and what was the business opportunity.
Mhm.
But yeah, so we started out as actually a pop-up wine bar in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. I just saw the picture was like the little sign, little tent sign out on the sidewalk. So I had a friend who was had worked for a really cool boutique Italian wine importer for a long time. She was my kind of initial segue into like plugging me in to the wine professional sort of network in New York City. And so she had a friend that she used to sell wine to who had a liquor license. There's a little coffee shop. It's not even there anymore. If anyone knows Smooch Cafe, but it was this funky little coffee shop cafe in Fort Greene. And we discovered he had a liquor license he wasn't using because he
Oh,
wasn't open for dinner. So we convinced him to let us turn his little cafe into Vin Social on the weekends and the evenings and leverage his liquor license to bring in some cool wines. And I was doing all the cooking. It was so much fun. And it was just kind of wild to think that that's really how it started. But it was very opportunistic about just popping up and creating interesting, innovative, unconventional wine experiences for consumers. So we started doing pop-up events. We would find unique spaces, do sort of pop-up tastings one night only, or maybe 4 weekend series. Until I found, and this is actually how I kind of came to know Doug, the New York Tech Alliance, that I got introduced to the owner of a newly open wine store in meatpacking, who had, unlike really any other wine store in the city, had a private finished wine cellar that was set up for private tastings. And
amazing.
so I pitched him, I said, listen, you need help bringing people to your store. Let's turn this space into a moneymaker, like help bring people together. We can bring winemakers in from our importers and host these really cool curated events for your customers. And I can host Vin Socials there. And that's really how it became more of a regular thing. And through that, I was really just kind of honing my approach to education, building my toolkit. Because I had a design background, I had the benefit of being able to really design cool educational tools and collateral, throw up my first website and all these things that look, legit. And, but it was through all that work that I started getting hired by companies. Companies started taking notice. So I would come into companies like Google, L'Oreal, Major League Baseball, and they would hire me to come in as their expert som and bring a winemaker in potentially and produce a wine experience for their teams or their clients. And that's when I really started to see a huge opportunity. And that's sort of the sort of starting point of where we are today.
Yeah, it sounds like a very different business than where you're at today, and I know that especially you know because of COVID, having to transition into a more virtual experience from an in-person experiential experience really has changed the type of business that you are. But it sounds like what you started with really gave you the blueprint in the education pieces, the collateral, the concept to become and translate very well into a virtual experience and allow you to scale. I'm sure in a way that you probably wouldn't have thought about prior. Can you talk a little bit about that? When did you realize, oh no, we're gonna have to switch to virtual, and how did you accomplish that?
Yeah, it was very much about having sort of all the right puzzle pieces in front of us and just rebuilding the puzzle in real time. But to back up a little bit, so as I said, I started growing this corporate business, which was really just me as a solopreneur, one woman show, like doing all the things. And I realized that wasn't scalable at a certain point, right?
Right.
And through all that experience, identified another problem, which is that I was going to all these great lengths to curate these incredible wines to put in front of my guests at these events. And then the inevitable question at the end of the event is, I love these wines. Where can I buy them? Can I buy them from you? And I was like, oh, no. So that's when I realized Vin Social also had to become a reseller of these wines, a curator and a destination to find and buy these incredible wines. And so that set me out on a very naive and difficult journey of building an e-commerce and fulfillment business in a highly regulated industry that I literally knew nothing about. And I always joke that I probably spent the equivalent of a law degree talking to lawyers and having them tell me how it couldn't be done, going on many false positives and pivots, and ultimately finally figuring out how to sort of work this crazy system and make a proprietary mix of partners that could actually allow us to do what we wanted to do, which was be able to ship wine nationally and work with foreign and domestic wine. So very lucky that we built our V1 e-commerce platform and fulfillment infrastructure and launched that in 2019. And the intention was to be like a little edited, wine shop so people could buy more of the bottles they discovered through an event, and also create a subscription membership, almost like our version of a wine club, like wine club meets social club with educational opportunities. So at that point in late 2019, we were trying to figure out, well, okay, now that we have the scalability of the product fulfillment and, we're an online destination, we don't have a brick and mortar, that's like accessible, but how do you make the events accessible? How do you scale that? That is the most difficult part to scale. So we were actually starting to dabble a little bit in a mix of virtual and in person. So we were a little bit ahead of the game very fortuitously, because when obviously COVID came, I just said, oh, there's a huge opportunity here, because our corporate clients were starting to whisper of like, what can you do? Can you help us? And so I was like, I think we need to just like build a separate sort of business model and figure out how we can go full force and service sort of B2B, these corporate companies who we know rely on wining and dining for sales enablement, right? Like we say, business does not happen in the boardroom. It happens on the bar stool. And when the proverbial bar stool is shut down because of a pandemic, what do? And so we realized we had all the right ingredients. We have now national supply chain fulfillment. We can ship the product to their guests no matter where they are. And then we can bring everybody together in a virtual experience. So we really quickly got real fluent in all the virtual tech platforms, which was quite a journey because they themselves were startups going through massive growth. And I could tell you about all the trials and tribulations of all the tech issues we encountered. But we really were at the bleeding edge when this sort of paradigm shift happened, and it was explosive for our business. And in a way, a real blessing, because it allowed us to realize our ultimate mission, which was widespread accessibility to wine and to these makers that we love. And now we have just this exponential audience that we've been able to get in front of with our clients like Amazon and Salesforce, bringing their guests to the Vin Social table to have an interactive experience and discover and explore one of these brands that we love.
No, absolutely. And so, can you tell me a little bit about the current Vin Social platform, and is there discoverability of events for just the general consumers, or do they have to be invited by brands, or how does that discovery kind of work?
Yeah, so we are actually in the throes of a complete replatform, and we're going to be relaunching our B2C facing side of our business in early 2022. So stay tuned. It is
Awesome.
really complicated from a tech standpoint because we are essentially a marketplace. So Vin Social is the Uber hub, the connector, right? So think about us needing to plug in the brands themselves and the fulfillment providers, right? There are so many layers from like the way the revenues have to flow. So like the revenue plumbing is really complex because of the compliance aspects, right? Who's quote selling the product to the consumer? What bank account is that money going to? Is it being taxed appropriately? And all these things. Also being able to plug in and become sort of multi-tenant from a talent perspective. How do we think about like Peloton, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are cultivating these incredibly talented experts who sort of have found the virtual world to be sort of their new playground, if you will, like a new opportunity to do what they do in a completely different environment. So taking these people that is really great wine knowledge and training them to be excellent on camera. Think of it like a sommelier meets a YouTube star, right? And being able to offer them opportunities to kind of plug in and bring their audiences, empower their own communities with the supply chain infrastructure that we have, because we hear that all the time. There's these individual somms who have built their audiences, but they have no way to send wine to them. And so
Right.
we're really building Vin Social to kind of be this hub and power communities, brands, and our own sort of B2C experience. So yes, expect lots of exciting consumer opportunities to attend events live and on demand as we go into 2022. But our core business today, which is really just taken over because of its explosive growth, is the B2B side of the business. So that's really where we're contracting with companies who hire us to do, full virtual event production for them on one of our, virtual tech platforms, and provide all of the product fulfillment, the gifting, if you will, to all of their guests and invitees.
No, that's amazing. We could probably have focus the entire conversation on virtual event platforms and the ins and outs of what to do and what not to do. I've played with so many of them, but I want to focus more on your founder experience and the founder journey. And we usually have a couple of founders on this call, so if I'm going to pause there and ask if there's any questions for Sara or myself, please put them in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll make sure that they get answered. But I want to get back. One of the things that you mentioned about navigating the legal issues of selling wine across the country and international wine selling and all of those things, being told it's not going to be done. So as a founder, how did you educate yourself on how did you go through that process of educating yourself and figuring out what you needed to put in place, and when to not listen to the lawyers and when to just move forward, and all of that, all of those things.
My gosh,
you get so much input. So
that was a multi-year journey. I talked to lawyers in New York. I talked to lawyers in California. I think at the end of the day, it was just about really just trying to get really as fluent as possible on the complexities and nuances of the law and understand where the acceptable gray areas lie. And there's enormous gray area in this space. Mm-hmm. And the realities that, being able to, I guess, just be comfortable with some level of imperfection and knowing that there is some risk, but the likelihood of any enforcement is so minute that it was worth the risk, right? Because just learn, like understanding that this is all bureaucratic, like entanglement
Mm-hmm.
essentially. And so we fortunately just, it was all about finding the right partners. So we realized after thinking at some point we were pursuing our own full stack of licenses out of California, which is an importer license, a wholesaler license, a retailer license, so that we could literally navigate in all three tiers. It's a 3-tier system. So we can navigate in all 3 tiers. But then we started to realize that that was really taking us out of our core mission and our core expertise. So what we ended up doing is building partnerships with licensed entities in the 3 tiers. Well, we are one of the tiers, but so that we can be really fluid and
Mm-hmm.
be able to sort of take advantage of all the opportunities. So we have a retail partner for wine. We have a retail partner for spirits. We also have third-party, fulfillment operators who have expertise on their specific categories. And I think that was the biggest epiphany when we realized that it was actually best for Vin Social to remain an unlicensed entity, because it allowed us to really be able to do everything we want to do, because the compliance risk actually relies on our partners, but we chose them because of their expertise in knowing how to work within the confines of the law. And we're essentially the feeder system, right? So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially if you're focused on the marketplace side of things and continuing to build that marketplace. The more diversity of partners and suppliers that you can attract to that marketplace is probably going to be super beneficial for you in the long run.
absolutely.
So that makes a lot of sense. I love that. I hear that from a lot of founders. It's just like, I don't know how to navigate the legal side of things, or I don't know what I need to put in place to protect myself, and it's always, you need to have those conversations with your lawyers. And I love the point that you made of being comfortable with certain risks, and you're the only one who can monitor what that comfort level is, right? So
Exactly. It's like kind of, and as we've grown and we realize that at a certain point, you become more visible and you have to put more attention and more resources to compliance and to protecting those things, because in a very, when you're a tiny, tiny, tiny speck on the spectrum, like it's fine. Like don't let perfection get in the way of progress to
right.
get your proof of concept established, to kind of get like from 0 to 1, right? Because the likelihood of anyone like
Right.
coming and enforcing something is very small, right? And you can always fix it and improve it and better it later.
Yeah, absolutely. That brings us to my next question. You've been talking a little bit about this layer of technology that exists for your company and releasing a new platform in 2022. And it sounds like as your journey continues and as you become a marketplace and this mix, a hybrid place of both virtual and experiential kind of events, with different users like the sommeliers and the suppliers and the attendees, that the technology piece is something that you're having to build out, especially I imagine around logistics and shipping,
Yeah.
and getting things from one point to the other, and it'll probably become even more important. So I would love to hear a little bit about your journey as a non-technical founder, learning about the different technology stacks that you're needing to put in place, and kind of how you're making the decisions that are best for your business.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, it's been quite a journey. I've had to learn a lot rapidly on the technical side, right? Like I'm a creative, and a creative and a wine nerd. I am not technical. So I think for me, it was always about ensuring that whoever I'm working with can talk to me like a kindergartner and like teach me, because the last thing I want to do is be ignorant to the thing probably the largest single resource heavy investment that I'm making. So being able to understand exactly how it works and make sure that the way, that my brain and the way that I know, because I am the expert on the supply chain, I'm the expert on the legal compliance. Like, so making sure that that's translated
Mm-hmm.
properly has been quite an effort, right? And we've had to build, actually, which we've only realized after, like, sort of post facto in hindsight, during this crazy. So just to put in perspective, so this B2B virtual event side of our business started from zero in June of 2020. We went over $1 million in revenue with that line of business in like 10 months. So and at the beginning, it was still me. It was like an employee and a half, right? So
Right.
had to not just like field and like deliver all this business that was like flooding in, but I had to build an entire team on the fly remotely in a pandemic. So part of that was finding a technologist, a developer that could help us sort of fortify our existing tech infrastructure and help us build some new plumbing that would help sort of automate a lot of the heavy operational stuff that needs to happen behind the scenes. And one of the things we realized is there was really no technology out of the box that would take a event experience, let's say like an RSVP intake of attendee data, like their name, shipping address, blah blah blah, and be able to auto magically convert that into individual e-commerce orders for deployment to the fulfillment centers. And so we built that on the fly. And we, from my perspective, I was like, I think we was just like bubblegum toothpicks and like, scotch tape behind the scenes. But when we started, after we caught our breath and really started norming and had brought in some investment capital, knew we wanted to really invest a lot of that into our technical infrastructure and sort of 2.0 version of our web. That we went out to a bunch of more sophisticated dev shops and said, okay, this is what we built. Can you recreate it on this other platform? And they were like, what? This is novel. And we kind of came to realize that like we actually had built something pretty unique and proprietary. And so we even since decided to keep it intact. And because that was sort of became like a proprietary asset of ours, it sort of informed how we built the rest. And so, for me, I said, like, I guess as a non-technical founder, it was all about just really being open-minded and really curious to learn and knowing that I was never going to be an expert, but I need to be fluent enough to be able to make decisions and feel confident in those decisions. And so, I guess at the end of the day, it's about partnering with the right people that you really trust to sort of execute on your vision, because it is kind of like translating one language into another, right?
Absolutely. I get that question a lot from especially amazing founders who have these great ideas and they don't have the technical chops to put them into action, and so they're always looking for technical co-founders. And how do I find my technical co-founder? How do I find the technical person to help me build this? And I always tell them it's not an easy task, right? Like, it's about meeting people, building those relationships, and cultivating them to find somebody that you trust. It's like a lot like dating, in a lot of ways. I would love to hear how you were able to identify and find a developer that you trusted with your vision. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's been many iterations. There's been I kissed a lot of frogs. I'm not going to lie, but I think it was just about, we also had the benefit of, we didn't really talk about this, but we did a very public fundraiser. We did a WeFunder campaign. So there was a lot, out in the ether around what we were doing. And I would say beyond the benefit of us being able to like raise, pre-seed capital just to fortify our tech infrastructure and other things. It was a huge networking opportunity. And so LinkedIn is my like spot, right? So I have met so many incredible people through LinkedIn, and our current, CTO, who is not a co-founder, he's just a contracted, sort of fractional CTO, but came in as a potential angel investor conversation, and then, kind of got to know us, and we talked for months. I mean, it was probably like 1/4 of just kind of getting to know each other. And as I kind of got to know him more and start to think, wow, this might be the guy that can actually like execute this vision, has the right type of experience, and understands my need to have this be really understandable, and it still must feel like it's under my control, because the last thing I want to do is hand the keys to somebody that is right. I don't know what you're building. You know what I mean? So I guess it's like slow to hire, fast to fire is the sort of motto I always look like.
No, that's a good point, and a lot of people don't realize how difficult that journey can be, and how many people you do need to meet and potentially cycle through before you find the right fit.
Mhm.
A lot of people see the success of some brands and they're like, oh, it just happened overnight. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, it's years of work and a
Thank you.
truly a
That is the most
journey.
important message of all time. PSA. Nobody is an overnight success. Nobody. Right? Like it is
Exactly.
years of work. And I always joke, it's like the duck that's floating on water and they seem really calm, but like really they're like, that's me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, uh, Doug actually has a question. It's interesting because it is about productizing some of the marketplace that you have, and he asked with so many countries and vineyards and producers around the world, how do you prioritize which ones you kind of showcase for events, and how do you get referred? And that's an interesting question. Like especially as you start to build your community, like how are you taking input and creating and deciding which ones to put forward
Yeah,
for
I mean,
events.
we have our selection criteria is basically we need to make sure that first and foremost there is, at least at this point, right? As we grow our brand family, as I call it, not 100% of the brands can probably be diversity inclusive because it would just really be extremely limiting, sadly, at a point. But for now, we have the benefit of being able to make that an important pillar. So,
Priority.
looking for women or sort of minority, diverse, underrepresented makers, leaders within these brands, they need to be verified as sustainability committed in their farming practices, their production practices. They need to legitimately be a small independent business, so they can't, be like a craft brand line item on a large corporate conglomerate. And at the end of the day, they have to have a compelling story to tell. And they have to have done some of their own work in terms of like understanding who they are, because they need to know how to articulate that. Like, what makes you different? What makes you special? So we see these brands that are kind of like they've already done a lot of the work. They're making an incredible product. They've invested in their brand. They know who they are, and they just need that next pop. Um, and then, we like to have diversity represented from a global perspective. So, sort of wineries from different pockets of the world to show the variety of not just the grape varieties, but the regions and the climates and the cultures from which these wines, emerge. And so, our method right now has really been about having worked in the industry for a long time, I'm aware of a lot of brands, so we can just go directly to them and say, hey, we love you. Do you want to be part of this? Which essentially for them is a no-brainer. Do you want us to sell your wine and like basically be evangelists for your brand out there to these wider audiences that you probably otherwise wouldn't encounter? Yes, yes, yes. We have great relationships with importer distributors that happen to also have portfolios of this type of winery and winemaker. So they often are the first place to go. Hey, we're looking for a new South African winery. Like, our criteria. Do you have anybody? Send us samples. We'll experience the wines. If we like them, introduce us to the winery and we'll have a conversation. So it's kind of how it goes. I mean, now that we're getting a lot more exposure and more of the industry is aware of what we're doing, we're seeing a lot of inbound interest.
Mm-hmm.
So, winemakers will hit me up on LinkedIn, like, hey, can I send you samples? So, it's sort of an unperfect method, but as we grow, it is going to be, I think, quite a direct marketing initiative to the trade side of the industry around, apply to be part of, on the Vin Social platform.
No, absolutely, and I can see that really leveraging the community platform that you're looking to build with the direct to consumer style, having a lot of input and feedback into that, like how you're spotlighting and which products and brands get upvoted and whatnot. There's so many opportunities there. I'm sure that you as a founder are just kind of starting to imagine.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
already 10 years into the future, unfortunately. I'm like, people and operationally, not so much. But,
Right. No, absolutely. I know exactly what that feels like. Yeah, all the big ideas and then you figure out how to conquer them, right? Like how to
inch
make
by
them.
inch, right? Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Exactly. We have about 20 minutes left in the conversation, and so I want to talk a little bit about the future of Vin Social, and just we're moving a little bit more out of the virtual environment. I know that virtual probably will remain an important piece of your business, but as we move back into out of the strictly virtual experience. How are you as a founder and as business owner navigating that move back?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like we're kind of reliving the experience we lived last year, which was okay, virtual events. Who knows what the definition of a good virtual event is? And we were just learning it on the fly, both us and our clients. And I feel like, we were really, um, we made a large precedent in terms of like making sure that we could sort of define what does an excellent virtual experience look like. It's not just about going on Zoom and doing what you did in person, but it's sort of like breaking it down and rebuilding it for this new environment and this new dynamic. And I feel like the same thing is now happening with hybrid because there's lots of talk around hybrid. However, not a single person I've talked to knows what the heck a good version of a hybrid event actually is. And I've been to a few that have been terrible. And so we're sort of in that same spot of like, how do we really take the initiative and the lead again in defining what is our version of a successful hybrid event? And the challenges that lie there, primarily from our perspective, is that essentially you're creating and producing two simultaneous events. So it is quite a lot more costly, takes quite a lot more staff. And it's about making sure that you're not just for the sake of, I don't know, quote, efficiency, having two audiences, an in-person audience and a virtual audience, but how are you actually threading them together so that it's in no point during the experience does one audience feel neglected, right? Because that is so important for us. We are all about delivering really high touch premium hospitality as Vin Social, right? Because our clients are very demanding, right? And they want that real high touch. They want that concierge level feel. So for us, it's about really identifying our role in taking an in-person experience and amplifying it very effectively to virtual audiences. So that's where we really see the future of Vin Social is being able to say, listen, if you want to produce an in-person event, we're happy to sort of be the simultaneous host of your virtual audience and help you integrate the two. So there are definitely requirements in the physical space for AV equipment, right? Like you need to, if you have a physical audience, you need to have some big screen TVs, because I've been an in-person guest at a virtual event where they have a speaker on a tiny TV and he's sharing slides, and I'm like, I can't read that. Like, what's the point, And likewise, if you have an in-person speaker who you want the virtual guests to see, they need to be mic'd properly. They need to be, lighted properly. And so I think these are just the things. I think there's a whole new opportunity almost for like event venues to offer this layer of AV sort of equipment capabilities to their spaces that lend themselves to extending into the virtual audience. So that is at the forefront. It's on the tip of all of our clients' tongues because they say they want it, but they have no idea what it means or what it will entail. And so we're in that exploratory sort of like experimental phase of figuring that out.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, and it's going to be an interesting time moving forward as we get asked when are we going back to in person, and it's a hard conversation to have. There's so many factors, right? There's so many factors right now that are impacting it, but the biggest factor is we depend on our partners to host us, and so it's like, well, when the partners are ready to have us back in the space, then we'll have that conversation, and then the question is, we've built this virtual community, so we don't want to neglect them. And I'm thinking along those lines of how do we thread the two together, what products are out there to help us achieve that. So I love that you're as an event producer, as someone who's running an experience based business, that you're thinking in those directions, and it's really quite awesome to hear. And I think there'll be a lot of products that come out in the next couple of months that will definitely support.
And we're having those conversations with our partners now. The virtual venues that I like to call them, the virtual technologies around like, what are you building for hybrid? Because who's using it? Like, do you want? Well, let's beta test it together. Like, if you know something, help us figure this out. So again, it's all like we're all learning it in real time and understanding like what will work, what won't work. And it's all about listening, I think, to the audience and like,
Yeah.
what do they want to see? What do they not want to? Does an in-person audience really want to be on their phone on an app when they're in that's what we said. We're like, well, our events require their hands. Like
Right. You
they're
can't really
tasting
be.
wine and holding wine. So like they're gonna be holding a phone and like doing the thing. I'm like, I don't know. We'll
Yeah.
see.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, as a founder, it sounds like you're making a ton of decisions. You started off on your own, a solopreneur. You've built this amazing business. You've added this technology piece to the business, and as you continue to grow, it sounds like it's going to become even more important as you go through. What's one piece like? What would you say to founders who are just looking for some guidance right now? Like what was the best piece of advice that you've received on your journey?
That's a broad one, but I would say just agnostically, like one of the best pieces of advice I got from an investor advisor was, especially in this really critical stage of, still being in the growth stage, and how important it is to remain curious and not be so steadfast in certainty, right? Like, because I'm living proof of that too, right? Like, I had a vision. I was building this B2C wine club, e-commerce business, and then whoops, reality of a pandemic comes, roaring in. And what do? Like, you rethink the recipe, and all of a sudden it was massively explosive, right? So I think that's where, again, it's just like, keep building step by step the pieces, but always be open to that pivot of just maybe a slight reorganization or rewriting of the recipe, because that might be the sort of product market fit that you're just like ever so close to.
Absolutely. One of the things that's very apparent about you is that your willingness to continue to learn and to dive into some of these problems and understand them in a real way. So I can already sense that that's a big driving factor to your success overall. So and again, congratulations on all the success that you've had to this point. Before we wrap up, I do have a question of what is your favorite wine?
Yeah, I know. That's like, I always joke, it's like asking a mom of who her favorite
Right.
child is. So situational, seasonal, but I'm a huge white wine lover. I love all wines, but I'm on a kind of a personal mission to make white wine more understood by consumers and have it be seen in the same light as red wine more often is. I think a lot of consumers put white wine in that just quaffable, like patio pounder category. And in fact, there are plenty of those. However, some of the great wines of the world are white wines, and they're extraordinarily ageable. So just generally, I like to be a white wine evangelist. And that's what I want to drink more at the end of the day. Like, I love red wine, but like, I just want something cool and crisp and mineral, and there's so much diversity
Yeah.
in the world of white wine to explore.
No, that's amazing. A great answer. And I am sorry to put you on the spot,
No
but
worries.
I had to
Everyone
ask. I
does.
had to ask. To wrap things up, we usually ask two questions of our guests. The first one is, what is something amazing that has happened recently that has brightened your day?
Well, so many things, but I will say most excitingly, non-work related, my family and I are taking our first vacation in like forever. We're going to go to Mexico and like totally unplug for like a week, for my daughter's fourth birthday. So that is something we're really just excited about, because everyone that's a founder knows, like, you're just so driven by your vision and you've got to keep moving things forward. But, that's advice that I don't often take, but hear all the time from people that have done this. It's like, you have to like take the time to like unplug, recharge your batteries, because you're only going to come back better and like more invigorated and more focused. So taking that advice and doing that. So that's the big
Awesome.
thing. It's making me smile all day.
Yeah, well, that's the answer to my next question. I assume is, what are you most looking forward to in the near future?
Yep, that would be it. That's a Thanksgiving week in Mexico with my husband and my kiddo. But beyond that, I'm just really excited about 2022. I think, the capabilities that we will have as a brand, as a business with this new tech, which is like a beast and a half, right?
Mhm.
And it's all about perseverance and patience and understanding that everything takes longer than you think. But I'm really excited for what's to come, and the sort of growth that we will experience when we are able to sort of relaunch this new platform and realize the B2C side of our business in a really new, innovative way.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see kind of where you go with the technology piece, and how, if you're holding it as a proprietary model, what will that be a line of business that you explore down the line for others to kind of adopt? There's
Yeah,
so
the
much
power, the
opportunity.
power, powered by Vin Social is
Yeah.
definitely a
That's amazing. I'm really, really excited by this. And to wrap things up, is there anything that you would like to ask from the community, or anything that you would like to offer to the community at large?
Yeah, no, I mean, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening and being interested to hear my story. I'm like, I always offer to anybody, I'm super, super accessible. Like I don't know everything, right? I'll be the first to tell you that, but I've learned a lot through the School of Hard Knocks. So I'm on LinkedIn. Anybody ever wants to just chat, I love to network with other founders and just sort of like have that camaraderie around, we're going through the same thing, maybe on totally different, universes, but really living sort of the same thing. So that's always great. So feel free to reach out and direct message me on LinkedIn, and likewise, to anybody that's here. If your company or anyone is interested or thinking about doing gifting for the holidays, or looking to entertain through a wine tasting, a whiskey tasting, a sake tasting, a cocktail class, any of that stuff, we love referrals, and that is the biggest driver of our business. So
That's amazing. Well, it was such a pleasure connecting with you today, Sarah, and having this great conversation. We touched on so many different subjects and decisions that you made along your business, and how you've grown your business. And it's all really quite interesting. I'm sure we could talk for another 2 hours, but
for real.
well, we'll go
Thank you.
ahead and wrap it up there. And again, just thank you to you. Thank you to everybody who is in the audience. We did record this session, so if you arrived late or missed it, we'll post it on our socials as well. And you're always free to connect with myself, Andy at nytech.org, or Sarah on her LinkedIn, Sara Moll on LinkedIn. We'll send that around as well. But thank you, everyone, and I
Okay.
hope you have a fantastic afternoon.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Doug. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Sarah.